Welcome to the What Now podcast, a podcast for people who are struggling through the 5 stages of grief. Nurse Melinda is here to show you how to embrace it and cultivate it into something beautiful. And now to assist you in the journey of life's shit show, Nurse Melinda.
Nurse Melinda, welcome to another one of Life's Shit Show Remedies. This one's about embracing cancer, right?
Yes.
Talk about a shit show. Wow.
Talk about something that affects everybody on this planet.
Yes. I've had some family experience with that, but I'm sure you as a nurse have had far more experience than I have. Thank God.
Yes.
But why don't you tell us a little bit about the experience that you've had so far with cancer and how it can benefit others who are listening today?
Oh my. Okay, so this podcast within Embracing Cancer is all my mom's fault.
Way to go, Mom.
I know. She was a smoker since she was 13 years old. And back in the day, that was the cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And like everybody else who is addicted to smoking or vaping, they just think it never is going to happen to them. But a few years ago, oh my gosh, it's been a while ago actually, she was having some dizziness and she thought she had just a syncope episode, but the doctor had told her she couldn't drive anymore, but she was still driving. And then one day she called and said, I just can't move. Like if I move, I throw up.
Oh,
There's
wow.
something wrong. And so I took her to the ER. Now, mind you, being in the medical world, we are never, well, I can't say we,
Yes.
I am not very nice to my family when it comes to medical conditions. Like, you're not dying. So if you need to go to the ER, you have to tell me you need to go to the ER. I'm not taking you. If I'm doing CPR on you, I'll call 911. But you know what I'm saying? It's different because in the world of acute care, you see it all day in, day out. And so nothing is really that big of an emergency. And so I asked her, do you want to go to the ER? And she said, yes. We're in the ER. And they said, well, we think it's just syncope, but I guess we could probably do an MRI. And I said, we need to do an MRI. And she looked at me and I said, Mom, whatever this is, we'll find out, but what if it is cancer? And she was just laying there. And in those moments, when we talk about the 5 stages of grief, right? In those moments, what is she thinking? What is she doing? And I wish I would have just asked more questions when she was alive. But so they came back. They told us that she had tumors in her brain.
Oh.
And that if she would have waited just another day, she probably would have passed in her sleep or something like that. But it ended up, she had a rare cancer that they actually wanted to study because rarely does cancer go through the blood-brain barrier. And when it does, it's usually that's like one of the last places it goes. But that was the only place in her body that it was. And it was lung cancer in her brain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait. Lung cancer in her brain?
In her brain.
Okay, explain that one to me.
I don't, that they can't, they wanted to study her and she was like, no.
Well, that makes sense. This is a rare lung cancer in my brain.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, when she's laying in the bed, I just said, look, I am going to be your number one cheerleader, because I knew if I begged for her to fight, she would. But coming from the medical field, we also know that we're taught to save a life at all costs, whether it's a quality life or not. We're taught to save it. And so I've seen some lives be saved that I just question, that I know that God has called back over and over and over again. But as humans, we keep interfering. Right. And so I just said, I'm going to let you decide at any point in time in this journey. If you want to fight, I will fight with you. But if you don't, I won't. I will just hold your hand and help you go. And, there's a longer story. I have a whole book ready to write, but she decided she was going to do some radiation just because we had a birthday gift for her. Mm-hmm. We were taking her to Tennessee to meet and see the like to see all of Tennessee and the Country Hall of Fame and those sorts of things because she knew all those singers when she was younger.
Wow.
She knew Johnny Cash, and she knew, so that was like her birthday present that we had already purchased before we found out she had cancer. So she did 9 days of radiation so that she could go on that trip. And then on that trip, she decided she was done. She didn't want to do anymore. She was just like, I'm just gonna live it out. And she lived for 2 months. And for the last 10 days, she wanted to live at her house by herself. The last 10 days, she lived at my house, and every day was a new day, right? Every day was a new experience for her. And she would ask me questions like, why can't I see anymore? And then she would say, why, when she was incontinent of urine, she's like, well, I guess it's time for diapers. And she threw her underwear at me and she was like, bye-bye, panties, I don't need you anymore. And just every day was a grace. It was a grace to watch her just decide that her time on earth was magical, but she's ready to go.
So she actually had, as best as she could, a little bit of a sense of humor in dealing with this stuff.
Oh my gosh. And the last thing she said, a sense of humor. I walked in and I was like, hey, Mom, how are you doing this morning? And she goes, oh, that is the shit-eating grin I've ever seen in my life. She said,
My God.
Today must be the day. And that was the last thing she said to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I was like, yeah, well.
How long ago was that?
She passed away in 2019, December.
Okay. So you've had some time to deal with it. How the rest of family handle that situation?
Do you know, I think, well, again, because I'm in the medical world, I think that we all see life differently.
Yeah.
Our kids have heard, not necessarily stories, but have had experiences where we've had real raw talk, and that's what we do at our house. And so they were all there, and they helped out, and they saw her each day as she progressively passed on. And I think that they realized that there's beauty in that. There's really, really a magical thing when somebody passes, like when their last breath happens. There's this open up of time that is just so crazy cool.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way?
I mean, I've been there in the nursing world. You're there a lot, right? And sometimes you're there with chaos.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're there with sorrow, and sometimes you're there with gratitude. So it's all different. But in my experience, when somebody has taken their last breath, there's just this, if you're really paying attention, there's just this really quiet whisper. And it's profound. It's so weird. Like, okay, so when my mom was passing, I was so tired, and she was listening to Richard Rohr, who is a Presbyterian preacher, and my mom is Indian.
Oh, okay.
I know I don't look it.
Sure you do.
But I know I'm like the whitest one in my whole family. But anyway, so she's Indian, and so I said I just got to rest, and I got this. You need to turn on the drums.
Really?
And so I switched it from, Richard Rohr, who's really into spiritual Christianity stuff, and turned it on to the warrior drums. And as soon as I turned it on to the warrior drums, I said, you better not go without me knowing. Like, that's not fair to me. And I dozed off, and all of a sudden I heard wake up. And as soon as I woke up, I put my hand on her chest.
Yeah.
And she went,
Oh my gosh. And that was the moment? That was it?
that was it.
Wow.
It's crazy cool.
That is a crazy cool story. Wow. So what advice would you give someone who discovers they have cancer and they're having a now what moment? I've had limited experience with this, if I may share a couple of things. So me personally, it was a few years ago, but I discovered by accident that I had cancer in my left wrist. See that cool little scar right there?
Wow.
So I thought it was a wart. I was like, well, that's weird. And so my wife goes, well, let's go see the doctor. I'm going to go in there anyway. So doctor looks at it and goes, oh, that's kind of weird. Let's do a biopsy on that thing right now. So we did a biopsy, and what do biopsies normally take? Like a week, a couple weeks. I got a call 2 hours later.
Oh my gosh.
You need to come in right now. I go, why? He goes, you just need to come in. So I went in, and he goes, so he explained that this was an award. It was malignant, and we need to get rid of it. And I go, oh, okay. So when do you want to do that? He goes, we're going to do it right now. I go, really? Yes. I go, but I had my suit on. Those days I wore a suit. And I go, well, can I go home and change? And he goes, okay. So I'm going to give you this, what was it, a Xanax? And he says, but you can't drive. Your wife has to take you home, change your clothes, and come back, and we're going to do it. And so I did. I went back, and next thing I know, they put the thing in your face. I'd never gone through this. And he goes, okay, now I want you to count backwards, from 100. And I go, this isn't going to work. 100. And I was out. I woke up, and my whole arm was bandaged, and he explained to me that what he'd done is basically filleted me like a fish. And they discovered that, I don't know the medical term, but you'll enlighten me in this. It was like tentacles that had spread like to the whole thing, and they had to go in and take out every single one of those things.
Wow.
That was ungood. And what made it worse is that he said, so you're probably never going to have full use of your left hand, and may take a while. And I go, well, that's not good because I'm a guitar player and I have a gig on Saturday. And he goes, well, good luck with that. But long story short, I went and did the gig with 2 fingers, and what saved me was the fact that I just kept playing guitar and somehow made it stretch, even though it hurt like heck. But that was my what now moment, and that's how I overcame it. And I was terrified. My wife was terrified. And my wife has been through her what now what moment as well when she was diagnosed with cancer, and it's been 6 years now, and she's doing good. But you never know who can get hit with this stuff. I mean, 2 out of 2 people in my family got this. And it seems that we all have this, this now what moment. And each, like for me and my wife, each person's now what was different. It's like, well, now what? Well, you got to do these things. And now what? So it doesn't seem to be, to me, that there's a specific path or answer to now what. It's like whatever now what is going to fit with you and your lifestyle. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, but I wanted to share that with you.
I love it. I love it. And I think that's the thing, right? Everybody has some experience with it.
Yeah.
And some experiences are great and grand and beautiful, and some aren't.
It was not.
Yeah.
And hers was not. It was awful, and I won't go into all the details. I'm sure she wouldn't appreciate me telling all that, but she got her a lazy boy chair because she was like this, and she lived in that chair for like a year.
Yeah.
But she's doing better now. So she had her now what moment, and I think hers was we as a family all rallied around and did our part.
Well, and in the 5 stages of grief, when you're dealing with it, I think that not only herself as a patient, but you're probably going through those same stages, right?
Yeah.
You're in denial of, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's okay. And then you're angry because, you mentioned earlier, you're like, I'm a good person.
Yeah.
Why? and it's ironic that you said that because I wrote this blog. I used to just write things on a blog. and I wrote this blog, and it was named Without Innocent Victims, There Would Be No Cure.
Oh.
Because when you have something, in most cultures, they believe that disease or trauma or karma happens because you deserved it or because somebody in your lineage deserved it, and it has just been pounded down, right? And so when for instance, like if you were out partying one night and you had a one-night stand and you ended up with herpes or something, right? Then people would say, well, you deserve that.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But when you have an innocent victim, somebody that doesn't know or gets cancer or gets a disease not willing or knowingly, that's why we come up with cures, is because of that.
Well, you know what? That makes sense. I never thought of it that way. Yeah. Yeah, because, we all have that moment, and my wife is going, I don't know why I have this. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I live a healthy lifestyle. I exercise. I do all of these things. Where did this come from? It's like, I had no answer. The doctors have no answer. He was just like, well, genetics could be. But there was no answer.
Yeah.
And
that's what you want, right? You want answers. You want to blame somebody. You want something.
I want an answer. Mm-hmm. Who can I blame for this?
Especially when you can't blame yourself.
Right. This is not my fault. I'm living a good life, and this happens to me. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of at a loss for words now because I'm not sure what I should and should not say. I don't want to get.
Maybe your wife needs to be a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, well, I will ask her again. She's rather shy and guarded about that, and I want to make sure that she feels comfortable. She has an interesting story to tell. I think probably all cancer survivors have an interesting story to tell, going through the 5 stages of grief, going through the part where they finally embrace it one way or another. Either it's going to end up like this, or I'm going to take whatever may come, or I'm going to fight to make my own outcome. So there's still decisions, I think, that everybody who might be experiencing cancer with themselves or a loved one is going through. It makes it, I don't want to say interesting, but it's
a shit show.
It's a shit show. It's like, what the hell? Come on, man. This happens to other people, not to me. What's going on here? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things, so my mom accepted it. She was like, okay, this is it. I've lived 79 years, had a nice life. I've traveled places that most people never travel. I have great kids, and I'm done. But then she could have been in despair. Right? She could have been in a world of, I guess you just take your big pile of shit and just hold on to it.
Yeah.
But instead, she was living in a world of wonder. She was always saying, why is this happening? And she would tell me, how come I can no longer feed myself? How come I no longer can do this? How come I no longer can do that? And it was nice because I'm in the medical world, so I was able to tell her, as her body started shutting down, things like that. But it was really cool to see her in a world of wonder. And so when I thought about this podcast, I really thought about her because as I was thinking about doing it, I was like, there's other people out there who have had cancer and who have embraced their life with that diagnosis or that treatment or that whatever, and what have they done from there? Mm-hmm. And then there are other people who have passed whose families have embraced that passing and where they went from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Totally.
So when we were younger, I'm not going to say how much younger, a lot younger. I mean, my husband and I are avid softball players, but we had a friend who was diagnosed with cancer. And she had no insurance. She had 2 young children. And, at the time, there was really nothing she could do for it. And so we rallied our whole town together and we started the softball tournament. It's called the Hit Run Score. It's still happening today.
Wow.
Happens every June in Vernal, Utah. And we, in 2 weeks, we rallied our entire community and we earned $10,000 for her.
Wow.
And it helped her with paying, some funeral expenses and stuff like that you just, let's face it, we don't plan for that.
No.
And it's just crazy. I see her kids now and I don't even recognize them. Half the time they come up to me because they're like, oh, it's been such a long time, but it's so cool to see how it's affected still to this day, and that's been years ago. It's been going on for almost 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a story. So before we go, what would you recommend people take away from today's podcast if they're suffering with cancer or perhaps have a loved one or a family member who is? What would you want them to take away?
I think that if it was me, because I don't know if there's really a takeaway really, but if it was me, I wish I'd asked more questions to my mom. Like, what does she see? What does she feel? I felt like I was intruding, and I hope that in this process, we can understand our loved ones' journeys a little bit deeper. Mm-hmm. If we just ask them, what is it like?
Oh, that's a good point.
Because we all want to know what's on the other side. I mean, I know what's on the other side. I've been there, but we all want to know what is it like? Like, do you see colors brighter? Are you trying to like stop time so that you remember that moment forever, however that long is? Or do you just shut your eyes and wish that it was over? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because we're always talking about seconds of days.
Yeah. A lot going on. I'm glad that we have more podcasts about this topic coming up in the future. So we would invite everyone to be sure and watch and subscribe and listen and share all of Nurse Melinda's podcasts, especially the ones about embracing cancer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys again next time with another episode of Now What? with Nurse Melinda.
This has been the What Now podcast with Nurse Melinda. Please like, subscribe, and share. We invite you to join us next time as Nurse Melinda assists you through life's traumatic shit show on the What Now podcast.